For most of us, learning to fly is one of our proudest accomplishments, one, I'm sure, that has added an exciting new dimension to your life. Do I sound like a dating service or what? As a pilot, you get to do things non-pilots can only dream about. But as you might guess, while you're still training to be a private pilot, there are limits to what, where, and when you may fly. So let's briefly talk about the FAA's general limitations for you as a student pilot while you're still developing your skills. Once your instructor has signed you off for solo and solo cross-country flights, you are allowed to fly your Skyhawk solo to build confidence in the maneuvers and techniques that you've learned. But the operative word here is solo. You are not allowed to carry passengers yet. The FAA wants you to have your private certificate first. You are also not allowed to use your flying for business purposes because the pressures of business might well distract you from that all-important flight experience. And as you might imagine, the FAA takes a very dim view of your being paid to carry anything or anyone. Now, how about flying to exotic foreign lands? Well, again, with a couple of exceptions if you're flying to or from Alaska, you will need your private pilot certificate before you start flying across any international borders. Now, after you achieve your private pilot certificate, one of the best things is shedding that solo requirement. Once you're a private pilot, you do get to carry passengers, but not for hire. However, as a private pilot, you can share the operating expenses of the flight with your passengers. And what you're allowed to share are things like the fuel, the oil, the airport expenses, or the rental fees on a flight. But they need to be divided equally among you and your passengers. Sharing does not mean that you kick in $1 and every passenger pays for the rest of the flight. That doesn't work. You, as the private pilot, cannot pay less than your fair equal share. After hearing all that, you might be surprised to learn that there is one time when you can carry paying passengers, and that's when you carry passengers who are paying for the flight, provided it is a charitable airlift. The passengers are making a donation to the charitable organization for that flight, but you are not being paid. Now, there are some requirements that have to be met. First of all, you need 200 hours of flight time, and the flight must be conducted during daylight under VFR conditions. But it's nice to know that as a private pilot, you can do something helpful for a charitable organization and your fellow man. Do you think that the FAA would ever let you drop something from your airplane? Well, the answer is yes. Objects may be dropped from an aircraft if you take precautions to avoid any injury or damage to persons or property on the surface. For instance, newspapers are delivered by air in some remote areas. And a lot of times, a pilot's group will set up contests where sacks of flour are dropped in spot bombing competition, just as a test of skill. As a pilot, you are pilot in command, which makes you the final authority as to the operation of that aircraft. I love it. It's the only time I ever get to be the final authority on anything. You, as pilot in command, have the last word concerning the operation of that aircraft because you're the one who knows what's really going on and the seriousness of any problems that may develop. Suppose you have an in-flight emergency, and suppose that in-flight emergency requires immediate action. As pilot in command, the rules say that you are allowed to deviate from any regulation to deal with that emergency. That is part of your authority, which makes perfect sense because the FAA doesn't want to restrict you when it comes to keeping you or your passengers safe. And you don't have to make a written report unless the FAA administrator or his designees request it. Even if you deviate from a regulation because of an in-flight emergency, you still do not have to make a written report unless they ask for it. Now, as a private pilot, you do, of course, have a few restrictions. Suppose that you want to get involved in gliding, But instead of flying gliders, you want to fly the plane towing the gliders. Well, as a private pilot, you can tow gliders, providing you meet some requirements. First, you must have logged at least 100 hours pilot in command time in the same category and class of aircraft that you'll fly to tow that glider. And you must receive ground and flight training in gliders. In addition, within the last 12 months, you need to have made 3 actual or simulated glider tows accompanied by a qualified pilot. See, they want to make sure that if you're towing a glider, you really know what you're doing. I should be qualified to tow gliders. I've been gliding through every job I've ever had. Well, there you are, folks. Now you know some of the fun things you can do as a pilot and how you can qualify to do them legally.